6:15 being the time, we can start our meeting. I'll call roll. Abang is absent. Collins.
Here.
Doherty.
Here.
Gingrich.
Here.
Nowak is missing. Scala.
I am present.
And I'm here. Is there a motion to allow Mr. Vicek to join us remotely?
Doherty.
Doherty and I'm pulling.
You
All those in favor? All those in favor?
That's tough to pick up on the audio, that point, right? Use over there, you can do that.
Okay, approval of the minutes from the last transportation
I'll move
meeting.
to approve.
Scala and Doherty, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Member comments. Anyone here?
No, there's no public comments.
Mr. Vicek? Yes, Mr. Vicek, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two things. One, my understanding is that California is now going to, by 2035, stop selling fossil fuel vehicles. I would like to be noticed by the Department of Transportation and the board as a whole, that I would think that there would be a trend nationwide with California age 30 vehicles. Second, before the agenda was done, I sent you a request to spread a discussion to eliminate the motor fuel tax. After seeing the agenda, I understand now why the chair has decided not to do that. However, I think in the future, I would request the chair to consider discussion on eliminating the motor fuel tax. But thank you very much for your consideration. I yield back to the chair.
Thank you. Okay, no further presentations for 23 budget.
Okay.
Who's leading that, Scott?
Scott will, but I will give a couple opening remarks, even though I've been out of the office for a good week here. My son was having some health issues at college, heart issues. He is doing well, but we just got back yesterday. But I did want to recognize that we are going through the budget process and recognize Scott, Ed, Beth, and Daryl on their efforts of putting together a presentation. Many of you that have been here before, some of this will look the same. Some of it will look new. You know, we're going to tell the story more instead of all the details. You know, we like details. We like data. And that may be too much, as I've getting the scolding here from Finance Chairman Scala. But really, there's four big issues that we're going to be covering today. One is the highway fund balance, and to make sure we bring that back in line with board policy. Second is personnel costs. As committee members know, those continue to go through the roof for us with it. We do have some supplementals that are associated with it, and I'm working with administration. But just so you know on it, what we're dealing with here, as we mentioned before, right now there are 7 vacancies in our maintenance workers. And we don't have a ton of them that are coming in for interviews. And so that is something we'll have to address, and as part of the last wage and comp study, there was about $23,000 that was identified for the DOT. Ours is going to be more than that. Second is contractuals and commodities. You know, I've been around long enough, as some people in this room, we've been on a maintenance budget forever. That makes it really hard for departments that are dependent on outside contracts or commodities such as fuel, parts. Those are going up exponentially. You see that. Not even that, it's the ability to get it and supply chain issues. And then last but not least is capital program. We have a lot of needs. Last year, as you may recall, any of our capital purchase besides the plow trucks were deferred. But also with that, our purchasing power is becoming less and less. And as you may recall, the budget policy identifies $750,000. With the $750,000, we're not even able to purchase the 3 plow trucks that we've been doing. not including having to identify other replacements. So those will be the items that we'll cover. I'll be quiet now, and I'll turn it over to the rest of the team here to go through our presentation.
Yeah, Joe did such a great job introducing that. He hit all the points I was going to hit. The one that he didn't mention that I think you'll see throughout this presentation is the impact of our Randall Road North project throughout our entire budget. That is a rather large project, and so you'll see kind of the impact that has going forward. So this is going to be a tag team effort. I'm actually going to hand it over to Daryl Coons for the second slide here. So take it right away. I'm Nate Perez.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Joe. This slide will go kind of quick. Just want to touch on 2023 looking forward from design and construction's perspective. We got a lot of great projects, a lot of impactful projects coming in 2023. Some in the design phase, some going to be built next year. Want to also highlight that we have projects in every board district. So that is a good item to note. For our design section, we currently have 13 projects, bridge projects that are in design. We are looking to add two new bridge projects on the county system, starting preliminary engineering next year. We are also going to be, we're still investigating partnering and bundling with Boone County. They have a series of 3 bridge projects right next to these 2 township road projects. We're looking to get some efficiency in bundling those 2 projects with their design contract. So we're looking to see how those numbers shake out and if there's really a good value for the county to move forward. Those are 2 very problematic bridges we have on our network. Additionally, in design, we are working on plans, permitting land acquisition for the northern segment of Randall Road. Looking to go out to bid in fall of 2023, construction in 2024. There we have several corridor studies. We've got 2 flashing yellow arrow safety projects that we're currently working on. Rosa bike trail along Gold Valley Road. We would like to start preliminary engineering on 1 or 2 intersection safety projects focusing next year, but that's going to be based on staff availability as we look towards that. For our construction section, Johnsburg Road, which is hiding just underneath Member Vijic's picture there, we have a superstructure replacement. That is a key focus for our construction group next spring. Walkup Road flashing yellow arrow. That will be going to construction next summer as well. And we have another large year in resurfacing with Pyatt Road, Lakewood Road, and Union Roads, all getting repaved next year. Construction will be completed next year on Algonquin Road flashing yellow arrow projects. That's currently going on down there right now, as well as Wilmot and Maine tying up that project. So with that, we'll give it over to Scott to finish up.
So, thanks, Daryl. Usually we would go into our highlights and goals, highlights from 2022, goals of 2023. We decided not to do that this year. You can see it in your packet. I think we have it on packet page 6. But let's jump to packet page 7, which talks about our FTEs. You can follow on with me if you'd like. As you can see, we've remained steady on our FTEs for the last 3 years at 66.5. At the same time, we've been asked to do more. We've got more lane miles, a lot of that coming from our Randall Road South project that we just completed a couple years ago. And there's more to come with our Randall Road North project. We're adding additional lane miles for that project as well. With the state and federal capital bills, that's injected more funding into the transportation sector, which means there's more requirements, there's more, responsibilities for DOT staff. And at the same time, our headcount hasn't increased over that time. So just wanted to bring everybody's attention that this is an issue, and I know especially our maintenance staff is looking to add headcount to accommodate the additional lane miles that we've added to our system. When we build new things, that's great, but we also need to maintain those new things that we've built. So that's kind of a future topic for a future fiscal year. Now the fun part starts. I get to talk about our 6 main funds. You can see them here. We've got 3 that are property tax based. The highway fund, the matching fund, and the bridge fund are all property tax levy. We've got a sales tax, the RTA sales tax. We've got 2 funds that are funded by motor fuel tax. We've got the state MFT that's dispersed to McHenry County, and then we've got our own county option MFT, which is now 4.4 cents per gallon. Of note, we're going to talk a lot, as Joe kind of teed up, we're going to talk a lot about the highway fund today. And Kevin especially is going to turn it over to Kevin next to kind of go over where we are with the highway fund, where we've been, and where we'd like to go. But most importantly, the highway fund is how we fund our operations here. It's how we fund our staff. It's how we fund our building. It's how we fund new capital equipment that we need to maintain everything that we build with the other 5 funds. So
It's kind of like everything but construction.
exactly, everything but construction is our highway fund. Just as important, if not more important, than our other construction funds. But it's different than the other 5. So with that, I guess, unless there's questions, I can turn it over to Kevin, CFO Kevin Boyso, who's got sort of 3 slides to go through with you to kind of tee up the highway fund issue, and then I'll take over after that.
Thank you for your time on this one, and I apologize about the slide and the numbers being so small. But really, there's 3 or 4 different data points that I want to drive your attention to. We're going to use the word surplus and deficit a lot throughout as we look at this historical information on the county highway fund. We're also going to look at the fund balance. That's another term, and that just means how healthy that fund is. And then we're also going to talk about the fund balance policy that the county board has. Yes.
Can you move that lower right window up to the top left? You can see those numbers down there.
This one?
Yeah. And then can you
Shooting this slide up.
I apologize.
Oh, sorry.
One is a bit.
Yeah.
To cut to the chase, it says 9 million.
9 million? Okay. All right.
2022, so
Oh, there's
That's
a-
my fault. That's why it's going to say 9 million.
Thank you.
So, just kind of a little bit of history on this. It's been publicly discussed that this fund over the last few years we have run it where revenues don't cover the expenditures, and that has created a deficit, right? So whenever you see that negative, where does that amount come from? It comes from any balance that has been built up on that fund over the last several years. And so, as you see, it goes 437,000 negative sort of deficit, then it goes to 1.2, and then you see how it's building up to 1.3, 1.7, so forth. In 2020, as we were working towards 2021 budget, we started to think, how can we bring this fund back to the county board policy, your policy, to where we're required to have a fund balance that covers 5 months of operations in this fund, and then and then not having to borrow funds from another county or DOT fund, such as in this case the RTA sales tax fund. So that's where you see now there's a plan that the deficit is not as large as the prior years, but there's still a deficit, right? And the trend is not looking good either. So most of it, 95% of this fund is through the tax levy. So you see the revenue side, it goes in 2020 from 6.2 million to 7.2. That was a deliberate intent to increase that levy by $1 million. And so then we'll look at 2022 as we propose it. Again, there is a deficit. It's larger than 2021, but by now we have burned through all the cash that we have on that fund. So we're borrowing money from the RTA sales tax fund to fund the operations of the DOT. Fiscal year 2021 is the first year where we report a negative fund balance, and so you'll see that under this negative 638,730. we forecast or we're expecting that that will be the same or it will be a larger number in 2022. When we start talking about the credit rating agencies, those who are reading the financial statements, if you're looking at a fund that is this large and it's running a negative fund balance for at least 3 years, 3 consecutive years, credit rating agencies start to look at that. And so every year, even though we're not issuing debt, we're not issuing general obligation bonds or anything like that, we still have a call with Moody's every year to say, where are you guys heading with these? And obviously, if that fund continues to go in the negative, that's a red flag for them, and they'll make note of that. So again, there's 2 issues. One is a fund being run in a deficit mode, and then the other thing is a violation of our own board policy. So what the opportunity that we have this year in 2022 has been is that we did really well in our revenues for the general fund when it comes to sales tax and other economically sensitive line items, income tax, and so we have an opportunity to fix this issue within one fiscal year, really. So that's what we're proposing, and this is all tied to the levy, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. But that's where there's a resolution in your packet today that is asking the approval to transfer $3 million from the general fund to the county highway fund to not only repay the RTA sales tax fund back, but also build that fund balance back up. So right now, year to date, we have borrowed $4.2 million from the RTA sales tax. In the county highway or fund, we have $3.2 million. So once we transfer all that cash, we have a negative or a loan that the county highway fund owes to the RTA sales tax fund of the $1.2 million. So how do we pay that back and build that fund balance back up and prepare for what's coming ahead with what Joe mentioned, inflation, supply chain issues, all the different labor market issues that we're seeing. So that's what we're doing right now. That's what we're proposing. We're proposing to fix this issue in one fiscal year. We're proposing to build the fund balance back up so we don't have to be borrowing funds from the RTA sales tax anymore. And then we're also proposing that we keep a levy that is one, realistic to what the operations of the county highway fund is, which we know that we can no longer levy $6.2 million or $7 million when the expenditures within the county highway fund are now reaching $9 million just via organic growth, labor market, inflation, supply chain issues, and you can add on to that list. But so that's where the proposal 2022 is coming in, and so the proposal again is to transfer $3 million from the general fund into the county highway fund in 2022, so this fiscal year. And so what that will do is it will, if you look at that fund balance policy requirement, it'll be 3.6. There will still in 2022 there will still be a requirement to increase that to meet that policy of 2.2 million, which we're proposing in the levy now for 2023, and that's part of the resolution to not be 7.5 anymore, instead be $9 million in 2023 for fiscal year 2023, and then have the option to keep that levy at that level for 2023 and 2024. And then at that point, there'll be a stable situation, and we're not going to be, there's not going to be that third year where we have a negative fund balance in this fund in our financial statements either, since it'll be corrected in fiscal year 2022. So I'm going to pause here. I don't know if there's any questions. Yes.
So you stated that the highway fund was borrowed from the RTA sales tax, and I believe you said 4.2 million.
Correct. Today.
As of today?
Today, yep.
So what is the actual number that we owe? So that's not, I want to be clear about what that really means, because you're doing inter-year loans,
Right.
and then when property taxes come, you pop that back.
Right, and that's, I'm glad you brought that up because, yeah, and that's where I mentioned, the county highway fund bank account, right? It has a balance of 3.2 million. We need to transfer that back to the RTA sales tax, in which case they'll have zero. And then we're gonna, again, there will be there'll be 1.2 million left that will be carried over year, if nothing happens, and continue to grow. But you're right, that 4.2 million, it was more of a data point saying that's how much we borrowed for cash flow purposes this fiscal year just to fund the operation.
More of a cash flow.
Correct.
Okay.
Not,
I just want to, so everyone understands.
right. Not a long-term issue of 4.2 that is going to grow into 6 or 7 or anything like that.
Right.
It's a bridge because the highway fund revenue only comes in twice a year.
Right. But you're correct, there is a cash flow issue. If there's no questions on this one, I'm going to move on to the next one. I don't know where, sorry, push it.
Can you transition for us?
Sure.
Sorry, thank you.
Maybe it's when you moved the screen.
Oh, maybe.
Question.
Like right now, Scott?
Yep, it's working.
We're operating, correct me if I'm wrong, on a policy of trying to pay as we go for capital equipment and things like that, correct?
Correct.
So how much of this is impacted by not borrowing funds to do those things versus trying to pay cash for doing those things? Is that having a material impact on the deficit, the reduction in the fund balances?
Because of the way that, as Scott mentioned, there's 7 different funds that are used to fund the DOT, right?
Right.
Operations. And most of that, the county highway fund is specifically for operations, day-to-day expenditures, not necessarily, the only capital item in there is the snowplow trucks.
Okay.
So is there an opportunity there to lease and do that? We kind of looked at that, but we thought these items are so, the specs on these items are so unique that it doesn't make a lot of sense to be turning those items around every 3-5 years more on the non-heavy duty stuff. We looked at that, and I know we have a plan where last year we funded, I believe it was 300,000 or 200,000, specifically for the smaller trucks that don't require a lot of.
But the 3 snowplows are like, what, $1.some million?
Right now, they're getting to 1.2 million.
So you're talking about paying cash for those.
Right.
If you didn't, you would have that money back in here, right?
There is an opportunity there, but there's also that interest cost and financing cost that goes along with that. And I know, my understanding is board policy and direction has been, not necessarily borrowing funds because of that, that interest cost not being not necessary. But is there an opportunity to say, we're going to finance the 3 trucks this year instead of flat out paying cash? Yeah, there definitely is.
Yeah, the last time we took on debt here at the DOT was 2007, and that was specifically for roadway projects that we had. We had 3 major roadway expansion projects, and we took out $50 million in debt certificates in 2007. We paid all that off in 2017.
Right.
And since then, it's been sort of our understanding not to take on additional debt for transportation projects or capital equipment if we can avoid it.
So, in this case, for example, this year, we could be budgeting the principal and interest on 3 snowplow trucks. I would say probably 300,000. We would get 3, I don't know how soon we would get them, but we would get 3 trucks and just budget that. But now we have an understanding that over the next 10 years, over the next, 7 to 10 years, we're gonna have to be budgeting that 300,000 principal and interest cost, plus the 300,000 that's coming next year. And if we're keeping up with that cycle, that's what we would do. Eventually, it would balloon into the 1.2 million at some point if we don't necessarily manage that. But yeah, there's that option. But then you're incurring that interest cost along with that. So. This graph, it's, I know it's kind of hard to follow when you got the breakdown, but I guess the overall picture that what we're trying to communicate is that, the levy, what the history of that levy has been and how going back to, 2012, 2008, the levy was set at 74 million. Over the last 5 years, we've been operating with a levy of just between 69 and 70 million dollars. Once you look at the detail, you can see the county highway fund, which we already saw on the. Do you mind going back? Yep. As you saw on the levy side, that revenue line item has been, so that 6.1, 6.2, 7.2, 7.9, that is included within this graph, and the idea or what our reasoning for this graph is just to show, that the levy was reduced and the board did a great job there. But now is that time to really seriously look at these line items or at this levy and think about how this is going to be impacted for fiscal year 2023. Pete, I know you like to add some to these maybe.
Well, I guess as Kevin said, I think the board did a great job of kind of right-sizing that levy for the last 5 years. And we were all proud of that. We had some competing interests in that we want to have strong fund balances and a debt policy that says we'll strive towards 5 months. We also had a budget policy that says we weren't going to take allowable growth for many years, and those interests kind of conflict. As we said in administration, we were proud of what we did, but it wasn't sustainable necessarily forever. And I think we're kind of seeing now that with all this inflation and there's the other picture that is, well, the things that the state's putting on us, we need to either allow ourselves to grow some on the levy side or look at some pretty significant reductions.
Or debt.
Or that.
Hey, Pete, what's the total of the state and the different unfunded mandates and the loss of ICE? What is the total your estimate in their budget?
Oh,
So we have the last cow we presented, that was 15 million. So 15 million of that includes $6 million in the, or 6.5 on the revenue loss within the ICE contract.
and court fees.
Court fees coming down, just the 10% bail issue that we have coming up, that's 200,000 and 250,000. There's 2.5 million other court fees that we're not going to be able to get. There's increasing staff requirements. There are on the expense side that we have heard from the state's attorney's office, from the public defender, sheriff's office, and so that all of those items. So unfunded mandates alone, it's 8 million. I'm sorry, Mike, if I'm stealing your line, but
We're going to have some of this discussion at finance a week from tomorrow, kind of showing where our revenues are.
We can have those discussions as many times as we can.
But yesterday we were talking about, we got the inventory of the different unfunded mandates. So when you total those up, it's 8 million, and then you got the inflation, you got the supply chain issue making up about 7 million of that. So right now,
And this slide shows it all. It all comes together. The highway fund, it's not on an island itself. It's competing with other interests and other pressures.
John, you've got a question.
Well, a statement, really. I mean, in all fairness, we started hearing about this last year, that this was coming. I mean, before inflation happened, before all these mandates happened, and this train's been coming. If I look back over the previous couple budgets that I've had, this train's been coming for a little bit of time now. It's not fair just to point to what's happening today. It's a series of events, and you can see it up there in that graph that have led to some of this. So it shouldn't really be a surprise that we're sitting here today. Inflation has increased what's happening and going on, and made it even more so. And the mandates that have come down the last year has compounded that as well. So I think that, you know, just to say that what's happened in the last 6 months has created the situation is not fair. So that's just my comment.
Crazy question, and I know there's a levy, there's a levy or a tax for the fuel plus the levy for just property taxes. Are we talking about this property tax levy?
Just property tax.
Just property tax, nothing to do with fuel tax?
No. No, and we have good news to report, and we'll do that at finance next week. Most of our revenues are stronger than they have been, and that's going to help us. We're going to need some help on the property tax side as well. Without that, we're going to have to raise some
Well, not to go to the resolution, but that's the reason why the suggestion is to take 3 million, because we've had revenues beyond estimates this year, sales tax and everything. So we have 3 million that we could utilize this year to help out the situation in the highway fund. So that's part of the reason why we're able to accomplish that.
And so, we haven't talked about this, we already talked about what the proposal is, but again, in 2022, the levy of 9 million, so instead of the 7.5 that we've talked about, if the levy remains at 7.5, that conversation will be a difficult one to be had, just because if you look at the proposed budget for county highway, it's already at 9 million, so we're already in the red. You levy less than what you're spending this year anyway, so that fund balance will just go to like $4 or $5 million, which is not recommended. Again, the transferring of the 3 million and then allowing the levy to remain at 9 million over 3 years, and that's again to rebuild the balance, right size the budget. Now we will have an understanding that yes, the budget policy sets $750,000 for capital expenditures, but we know that based on the emergency appropriations that you and the board have approved over the last 2 years, there's always a change to that, because it's no longer $250,000 per unit anymore. You're talking about close to $400,000 now. So we have to be realistic about that. We have to also be realistic about the labor market and the compensation challenge that we're having, and all the increases that are coming along with that. And then finally, the $9 million levy is subject to an overall increase of the county levy, so it can be siloed as a levy purpose and just looked at that as a $9 million and then adjust the overall levy to match that. It has to be taken into account as part of the overall levy. There's got to be an increase to the levy tied to that if this plan is going to work. Otherwise, again, the conversation will be different and the presentation will take a different turn if that's not the case. So again, we'll be, as we are working through the process, we're going to be providing updates to the finance committee about revenues. We're going to be looking at expenditures, and we, again, not just county board elected officials mentioning these, but also the need to look at expenditures a little bit closer and have a real proposal on if not these, then what. And so we're going to be presenting that as well. Not sure if there's any questions on these or comments.
I have another question, and I'm sorry for my ignorance in this, but could you explain a little bit that the borrowing the money from the RTA fund, why do we have that money, and what is wrong with borrowing from it, and does that cost us money to borrow from that fund?
Yeah, the first one that I'm going to answer is the easy one, which is there's no interest cost or anything like that.
We're loaning ourselves money to get through until the tax payments come in June.
And the reason we're doing it is, Joe has to be paid bi-weekly. Otherwise he'll be calling.
We can't say wait till June.
Right. And we can't say, in the property tax, because it's 95% of this fund is coming from the levy. That cash, that due date of May, September, or June, September, on the levy creates the issue that we get a cash inflow in this fund only twice a year. Well, I shouldn't say twice a year, but simplifying, I know that transfers happen more often than twice a year, but they're not coming in as soon as we need to pay our employees. If that's one simple way to look at it, or as soon as our vendors are due, or vendors' invoices are due. So to bridge that gap, then we borrow funds from the RTA sales tax. What's negative about that is there's two things. One is we're violating policy on we have to be fiscally responsible. The board has done a great job maintaining that. We need to keep a certain fund balance in some of these funds. And so that's one. And because of that, if we continue to do that over a 3-year period, then the rating agencies start looking at it from a negative standpoint. The auditors start looking at it from a negative standpoint. And the next thing you know is that you're finding yourself with a financial statement that has a material weakness or finding or note from the auditors, and then you're having to explain that, and that just kind of balloons into bigger issues.
And I'll add one more issue with doing this long term, is that it's going to delay transportation projects, right? If we continue to borrow from the RTA and the highway fund continues to go negative because we're using RTA to cover that, that's money that's not being spent on Randall Road or other transportation projects that are already programmed, that the board is committed to. We're not going to have the money to do it now. We have to delay it a year, 2 years, cut it all together. So there is a real impact on the public as well by doing this.
So there's more coming with
Yes,
the resolution and.
Again, I wanted Kevin to kind of give this overview first on the highway fund, because this feeds into the rest of the presentation. Everything is linked together, especially the RTA sales tax fund and the highway fund, because of this transfer. So without knowing about this, the other stuff is not going to make as much sense. So I appreciate it. We could put a pin in this. Well, I'm going to kind of go through the rest of it really quickly, and then we can come back to the highway fund issue later in the presentation. Yeah.
Thank you.
So Kevin already mentioned a lot of this, but the highway fund is the first one. I wanted to just show what our revenues are for 2023. The 9 million levy is identified here that Kevin just talked about. If you add in, disregard this operating transfers in. So the idea is what's shown in the budget packet today, the proposed budget, is the $3 million transfer in FY23. We didn't want to assume that this committee or this board was going to pass the transfer in FY22. We're hopeful that that does take place, but if that transfer doesn't take place in 22, we're showing it taking place in FY23. So the budget is kind of double counting in a way, this transfer from the highway fund, or from the general fund to the highway fund. Oh, Colleen, can you help me out again?
You go.
Thank you. Expenditures, we already talked about this. Most of it's personnel. We also have contractuals, commodities, and in the capital, that's the snow plows. That's 2 plows that we have budgeted for next year, shown out of our highway fund, the $750 that's approved by board policy. I talked about the operating transfer out, and then also the fund balance enhancement portion of $865,000. So that's really towards building up this highway fund to that 5-month reserve that's board approved. Mr. Council.
I thought it was 3 plows.
So our capital need says we need to replace 3 plows a year. That's what we've identified, that's what this board has identified as being necessary to ensure the long-term maintenance of our system. This budget only shows 2 plows.
Okay.
And that part of that is a recognition that in order to get our highway fund balance back to being healthy again, we understand that maybe we can't get 3 plows this year out of the highway fund. Maybe we need to live with 2 this year and look to do 4 next year, once the highway fund is in a better financial state. Had we proposed a supplement of $400,000 for that 3rd plow, all that's doing is depleting our highway fund balance further, which is opposite of what we're trying to do. We're trying to build the highway fund balance up.
And we'll go through at the end our capital program. Not only is it the plows, it defers all the other equipment we have. So we have last year's equipment that nothing moved forward with. That now moved to this fiscal year. We're not doing anything this fiscal year, so now that all moves to the next, plus all the other stuff that was on the routine. So it's not just the 3 plots, I want to make clear about that.
Yes.
And that assume, and this is based on the assumption of the levy increase.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So that's the highway fund. I want to move on to our other 5 funds because they're just as important as the highway fund. So the matching fund, also a property tax levy, has not been increased. It's been steady since 2021 at about $900,000. What we're spending that on, mostly construction, but we're also building that fund balance back up too. We've spent a lot of the matching fund on various large projects such as Randall Road, and so we're trying to look to get that fund back up to a healthier balance as well. So that's one of the only funds, this and the highway fund are the only 2 funds that actually have the fund balance enhancement. The other 4, we're going to be utilizing our fund balance to draw those down. Similarly, bridge, this is our last property tax levy that we get here at the DOT for projects, for specifically bridge projects in this case. Again, this hasn't moved from a levy standpoint since I've been here in about 10 years. So it's been steady at about $500,000 per year. Because they're bridge projects, we use these on engineering for bridges. We also get federal reimbursement, 80/20 on our bridge engineering. So that's why you see the total revenue at 2.4, even though we're only levying 500,000. So, in case you were curious about that. And like I said, this is going to be really spent for bridge engineering. We've got Daryl mentioned all the bridges we're working on. We have 2 more we're starting next year. So typically that's spent on engineering. RTA sales tax. We already talked about this a little bit, but here you can see what we project our revenues to be next year. In FY23, we're anticipating $14 million in revenue from the RTA sales tax. What's shown here, 2022, that's what we budgeted for this year. But at the time we were developing the FY22 budget, we didn't know what impact COVID was going to be having on our RTA sales tax. Well, as Pete kind of alluded to, RTA sales tax has been one of our strongest growth funds. We're impressed by the level of growth in the RTA sales tax. So in reality, we're going to get about $13 million in RTA sales tax this year, not the 11.6 we budgeted for. But again, that was due to not having adequate information at the time we were developing the FY22 budget. So we feel $14 million is a good estimate for next year. And I'll also note, the $14 million coupled with the utilization of fund balance of about $25 million gets us to the $40.8 million total revenues for FY23. And I'll get into what this is being spent on here. Mainly it's construction. A lot of that is going towards our Randall Road project from Ackman Road to 81 Polaris, kind of completing that corridor. That project, just so everybody's aware, we're targeting a late 2023 letting. So that's why it's shown in the FY23 budget, meaning we have to appropriate all the money in FY23. But you're not going to see a lot of the construction work starting until the 2024 construction season. But just due to the fact that we need to appropriate the money first, that's why it's all coming out of the FY23 budget. MFT, this is the state MFT that we get back from IDOT. You'll see here, this is the reason there's a decline from 22 to 23 is because the Rebuild Illinois Capital Program is coming to an end. So for the last 3 years, we've received an additional 3.2, I think it was 3.2 or $4 million a year for through Rebuild Illinois for capital projects. We anticipate that our last payment of 6 will be coming this year out of FY22. Meaning in FY23, that's the first year since the 2019 capital program where we're not going to receive any RPI going forward.
That big jump is December of 19, gas tax went from 19 to 38 cents.
That's correct. It doubled in 2019 as part of the capital program, in addition to the RBI capital.
Like the bond issuance program. And there are discussions going on in Springfield that maybe there will be in the future another bond issuance, but that's all really preliminary right now.
And I'll point this out again, utilization of fund balance of $14.1 million. So that coupled with our 8.2 gets us to the $22 million for the MFT fund. And all of that, almost all of it's going to construction. And a lot of that is for Randall Road. Again, that's the scale of Randall and kind of the shifting of money towards that project in our budget. The last fund I'm going to talk about that we get here at the DOT is our 4.4 cent county option MFT. This, you can see, even though it's adjusted for inflation, in 2019 they added an inflationary adjustment. So every year this goes up according to inflation. However, as Mr. Vijay mentioned, cars are getting more fuel efficient. We're not relying on motor fuel at all going forward. So this, as well as our state MFT, that it ultimately is a declining revenue source. Eventually, it will go to zero. How early that happens, that's up for debate, but it's not something we can rely on long term by any means. And again, $3.9 million in revenue from our collection of MFT, coupled with the 4.7 utilization of fund balance, gets us to the $8.7 million budget figure. And a lot of this, again, is spent for Randall, land acquisition for Randall Road, as well as a lot of our maintenance type activities we fund out of our RTs, or out of our county option MFT. So putting it all together, I'm not going to dwell on this slide, but $87.7 million revenue budget for FY23. And I can share these slides after if you want to dig more into the details. But I'll note, over half of that budget is utilization of fund balance. So 87.7 million seems like a lot of money, but we've been very good about saving up for Randall Road over the last 5 years. Hence the reason we have a utilization of fund balance to draw down on. So I wanted to point that out for everybody's information.
Well, but also to be clear that you're appropriating, but you're not spending.
Correct.
So
That's exactly right. Our actual bank accounts aren't going to take that hit probably until late 2024. We'll start getting payments to IDOT for our Randall Road construction project. So we've got a couple of years until our fund balances actually start getting drawn down. We're simply encumbering the money in 2023 for that project.
Do we plan, because of that fact, do we plan on, I guess once the contract's left, but you're budgeting $43 million for construction, chances are that number is going to continue to grow.
Yeah,
Next year,
with interest.
following year.
Yes.
Well, just because the cost of materials and everything else are going to go up every year for those projects, right?
Well, once the letting takes place, once we go out for bid, our prices are locked at that
Okay.
point. So.
But that's not until the end of next year.
The end of next year is what we're targeting, right?
Right,
But
okay.
we feel, we built in an inflationary
Okay.
estimate, and we feel like what we have budgeted for next year is enough to get us through for the Randall Road project. But ultimately, we won't know until late 2023 when the bids start coming in.
Okay.
You'll recall for the southern project, for Randall Road South, bids came in higher than estimates. We thought we knew, we had an engineer's estimate of X, it actually came in at X plus 1. So we had to go back for an emergency appropriation or supplement.
There was tariff talk then and steel tariffs and a lot of stuff going on.
Sure. Yeah.
In the next 6 to 12 months, we hope to have a much clearer picture on what those pressures are. And it's not only the inflationary, it's the supply chain. Because of the capital program, there is a lot more work on the streets. And you see that in the IDOT lettings on the sheer volume of projects that are going out there. So what we're unaware of is, does industry have the capacity to continue at this pace or increase it?
And I'm not sure
Keeping Jeff busy.
Yes, it is.
I'm not sure this is the appropriate time to answer this question now, so if it's not, just say so, or even if someone has the answer. But you had said that, the motor fuel tax is going to go to zero at some point. I mean, Mike mentioned about what's going on in California, so, it's going to be a problem. As a county, we don't have the ability to put a sales or tax on the sale of electric vehicles, do we? Or some type of a sticker or something?
I believe if we were home rule, we would, but because we're not home rule, I think we won't be.
Okay, so we have no ability to
We
do
only have the authority given to us by the state.
Okay.
That's something that could be pursued.
Okay. Thank
I
you.
will point out too with this slide, only 6 million of this 87 is for personnel. So I wanted to just point that out. Our personnel, while it's going up, it's only a very small percentage of our budget. And of this $87 million budget, only $10 million of it is property tax based. The other $77 million are non-property tax sources, sales tax, foreign fuel tax, those things. So that's it. That's all the funding stuff. I want to talk a little briefly about supplemental requests. In your packet, you'll see under the highway fund, we do show 3 supplemental requests. One is for personnel. We have some adjustments we need to make to certain staff members, both on the maintenance side as well as on the office side. And we're working with county administration on how that would take place and when it would take place. But we feel that we will have some supplemental requests coming.
For the non-union positions, the proposed $120,000 are non-union positions. The union contract should be resolved any moment. I mean, we're close to having that wrapped up. Thought we'd have it wrapped up by today, frankly, but we've got that locked in. Proposing some fixed steps above the union contract for those non-union people that are supervising them. So that'll take place and take care of some of that 120. Cheryl and I are going to continue to work with Joe on ironing some of these out. As Joe mentioned, our July 1st non-union wage adjustment really didn't touch much out of DOT, in part because DOT staff and the Transportation Committee has been good at pushing upward on wages, but the formulas used for the across-the-board adjustments don't fit real well with what we're experiencing out here. So we're going to continue to work on that, and we'll have some more solutions and recommendations for you a month from now.
Secondly, equipment parts. This is obviously just due to inflationary increases we've seen over the last year. Our parts budget from FY22 is just not sufficient. And so the $64,000 is a supplemental request. And keep in mind, the longer we hang on to our equipment, the more parts we're going to need to maintain that equipment. And so everything feeds on each other. We're only getting 2 snow plows, I mean, we're going to need to hang on to that third old snow plow that we wanted to get rid of. We need to keep it running. So that's why the parts budget needs to go up. And then lastly, we have this non-departmental inflation. I don't know if you call it a supplement, but I'm calling it a supplement of $200,000 for gas and diesel fuel. We've already gotten an emergency appropriation for fuel this year in FY22. And again, what we budgeted in FY22 is nowhere near enough for fuel expenses. So together, it's $185,000 in supplemental requests for DOT in 2023. So that's enough of me. I'm going to turn it over to Beth and Ed. They've got some maintenance slides, and then we're going to wrap things up because I've already taken way more time than I thought we would. So
Good discussion.
Take it away. That's okay. It is good discussion. Yes.
Good morning. Before we get, I turn Beth loose on the capital plan. We put together a slide here where we want to compare, because we're always asked about the different types of winters, where a winter could be very similar but still very different, where last year's winter and the winter before that each had 51 events. But you can see by the overtime hours, it was double 2 years ago what it was last year. So very similar with the regular hours. Our liquid use turned out to be about the same, but our salt usage was down 2,000 tons from the year before that. The total inches of snow that we expect a year are around 38, 40 inches of snow. Our source, we use one source here in the county at MCC, and we were actually 12 inches below our average through MCC. But being that our county is 600 square miles, you can have different totals throughout wherever you pick. And we've got another source up by the state line, and he was at 45 inches. So some fun facts about where we are. What we're really happy to state, though, is our liquid routes. We bumped to 4 routes last year. And this is the 4th consecutive year. Everything works out to approximately 38% savings in salt usage. With that being said, it was just under $40,000 we saved in salt costs last year by utilizing the liquids. want to keep that going up. Our average for salt usage was 232 pounds per lane mile, which was very similar to the year before that. So we were doing good there. But what's most impressive is on a liquid route, they're averaging between 80 and 89 pounds per lane mile. So what we're trying to do with the putting less chlorides into the environment and still being able to keep the roadways safe, we're pretty proud about. With that all being said, we'd like to move into our capital budget, which is, we keep hearing about the snow plows, and from the maintenance standpoint, as Joe stated earlier, we got 140 pieces of equipment. We got to keep an open mind that we've got more than just 3 snow plows that we have concerns with. Now I will turn it over to Beth to talk about the capital plan that we've got together.
Okay. Good morning. So I think that Kevin, Scott, and Joe have pretty much covered what I was going to talk about today, but just to kind of drive home that fact. This is a little bit of history since I came here. I came in 2016, so 2017 we actually put this capital plan together. As you'll see, that first column is what we actually budgeted for that year. The second column would be the supplement. I'm sorry. It was our request, what was actually budgeted, which is a line straight across the middle, which is the $750 every year, which is the budget policy, and then what we needed to have for the supplement. As you get to 22 and 23, you start seeing the recurrence that's going to happen. So this is kind of an overall. You can see that we've always budgeted, we need more than $750,000. The price of a snowplow in 2017 was about $250,000. I think Kevin stated that. Our hook lift truck this year is $395,000. So a regular snowplow is $343,000. So keep that in mind. It's not only inflation and everything else. It's these prices are driving up. So this is actually our capital plan today. Now this doesn't show deferrals except for 23. So I took the deferral from this year and added that to 23. But without deferring anything, this is just an overall glance. If we keep it at 750, this is how much you're going to be in. I don't know if that's confusing, but I didn't put the deferral on there. So our basic ask, just to keep equipment out, 3 snowplows plus other equipment, it's over $1 million a year.
Don't take this the wrong way, I'm not trying to be rude about it, but the budget policy states it that $750,000 is what the board is requiring you to spend on capital as far as snowplows, trucks, whatever, right? So we're saying that you have to spend $750,000 in that category, but there's no limitation to the height of that. Meaning, we're not telling you can't spend more than $750,000, and the highway fund being outside of that. I mean, I get you don't have a revenue stream to support that, but I guess I'm trying to understand the thought process that I don't want it to be assumed that we're capping you at only being able to spend that amount of money.
Ever since that number was identified, and that was years ago, even before Beth was involved with this. This is something that we worked with county administration on. And it was a number that was established to be, quite frankly, at the time, was lower than what we identified in our capital program also. All that was doing, and correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, Kevin, was committing $750,000 a year to our capital program.
I'd say you go back to like 2010, 2011, there was no commitment.
Correct.
It was every year, roll up your sleeves and argue for as much
No, that
as
was,
you can.
when I first got on the board.
Mike,
I made the
you
recommendation
are
to
the author of the $750,000. And it was, you're right, it was, you were going to get at least 750, and then we'll argue about what's extra.
Correct.
Right, so we know that, but the process budgetarily is that we have to put in for anything above 750,000 has to be a supplemental. And that's historically what we've done. There's been times when that can be approved, there's times when it can't be approved. But adding that into the issues that we have with the fund balance, it just becomes a much more difficult conversation. So we know we're not limited to say that we can only spend $750,000 or identify, but we are also realistic, that's what the board is committed to, that is the minimum.
Well, okay, so then help me out with the thought process of treating it as a supplemental in the sense that, and again, I get the highway fund issue, I completely understand that, but if you're budgeting for whatever, if you're budgeting to spend 1.6 million in equipment, and that's in your budget, what do you need a supplemental for?
Because we don't have the revenue that comes.
Well, okay, I'm not, again, I understand the revenue side with the highway.
This
fund.
is what the process has been ever since I was here, is that anything above 750 is shown as a supplemental.
Okay, why? What created that?
We're trying to show where the budget's growing, I guess. That's why we show even utilities that everybody acknowledges have to grow, but we're putting them in as a supplement because we've got this philosophy of a maintenance budget. You get what you got last year, you get your 750, but show us what else you're asking for. Show us where the budget's growing. And
Well, but that's for everything, correct? I mean, I don't.
to be sure, and we had this conversation a little bit yesterday at Law and Government, and people are turning to me and saying, why do we call this a maintenance budget? We know we gotta spend more money on bullets. And bullets aren't the same price as they were in 2006.
Well, but I guess I'm coming back to, so maybe as a county, we need to change thought
Yes.
process and
I
philosophy.
think this inflationary year has really drawn a sharp realization that the maintenance budget philosophy that has worked so successfully for so long needs to get rethought. And I actually scribbled that down this morning, that we need to come up with a new maintenance, a new bottom, or whatever it is in some of these areas, because it's not reflecting reality any longer.
Well, to me, a maintenance budget doesn't mean squat. I mean, a maintenance budget to me means you're maintaining what you got, but that is a variable that changes every single year based on the environment that we're living in. So a maintenance budget, Joe may not need money in X next year because of the environment that we're living in. I was teasing him, I said, well, according to people about global warming, we're never gonna need snow plows in 20 years. So
we could change it, and this is a bigger picture, Mike, it's maybe more finance. We could change it, we could change the maintenance philosophy in some of our offices and not others. A maintenance budget does work pretty well in the assessor's office. You get the same amount you got for commodities and contractuals as last year, or the auditor's office, and those guys are making it work. They're continuing to make it work, but that's not where the real costs are either.
okay, so I don't want to get hung up on terminology, because that's, to me, a terminology aspect in the sense that if you don't need more, then you don't need to ask for more, and similar to, I'll say when Terrio comes before finance and says, hey, it's an election year, these are my costs for the election year. In an off-election year, I don't need to ask for these costs, right? So his budget goes up and down based on an election cycle. To me, everybody's budget is similar to that in nature based on what's going on in the environment. I guess I have a hard time, your supplementals that you threw up there, to me, those aren't supplementals, those are things that you're gonna have to do. You have to have fuel, you have to, drive vehicles. So to me, that's not a supplemental, that's part of the budget, and it's our responsibility to figure out how we're going to financially support that operation, right? When we're a service organization, I've pounded that umpteen times. So
And year after year, we've met those needs, but I appreciate, I think we're all realizing that this terminology of maintenance budget maybe isn't the right language moving forward.
John?
So, a couple things. One, I agree with what you just said. One of the things I've struggled with since I've gotten on the board is this whole concept of supplementals. Because Kevin and I said a couple weeks ago and talked about this. It's really not, in my world, supplemental is always your budget spent $500,000 this year. Now you need another $100,000, so now you're going back and asking for an additional $100,000. You guys work off a base budget that says, and when you're planning your budget, the supplementals are the increases you want to a particular line item on that. So it's really not a supplemental. You're basically saying, I spent $500,000 last year, I want to spend $600,000 this year, and you call that a supplemental. To me, that's really your budget for next year, $600,000, that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, a supplemental me is if you want a piece of software that's going to optimize something, you know, that's over and beyond what your normal operations are. You pay for the software and you get it, or, you know.
But you were using it to show what the increases were from year to year to year.
We are trying to shine a light on where are the increases. And it's,
What I don't understand though is why a capital plan was almost being treated like an expense as a supplemental. To me, a capital plan always is, here's what it's gonna cost to do these capital things this year. But never, I mean, the guidance would be that the board would then say, well, we can't afford to spend that much on a capital plan this year. But the idea of it being, starting at some number doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, it is what it is.
we have, year after year, exceeded the 750. I mean, we have acknowledged that that hasn't been enough. Maybe there's a stark line on there, and maybe it's, maybe it's intended a little bit for dramatic purposes. But we have known we need to spend more than that, and we've allowed to spend more than that.
But actually, but you haven't though, right? I mean, this is showing how much they deferred. So, I mean, even though we say we're spending it, we're really not.
Right, the deferred has been, this year is the first year that we've had it completely deferred, and then that's going to increase.
So in 2022, you wanted 1.2 million, if I read that right, in capital dollars. We budgeted 750, you deferred 326,000 that didn't get done last year, this budget year.
Right.
So that's $326,000 we didn't fund.
Right.
That we pushed over now to 2023.
Right, on top of that, so that's why it jumps from 326 all the way to 868.
So if we handed you a check for 1.6 million today, you could do all your capital, all your vehicles, snow plows, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
If we don't, then it's gonna, you're basically saying the deferment's 8.6 as the 750. It could only, the deferment could be another 300,000.
It's still going to go up if you don't do it.
But we are also saying that we spent 1.2 million last year, even though we had the 7.2 million. 750,000.
No, we only spent.
The tan is what was the supplement.
There was zero in the supplement. So we didn't get what we called the supplement. We got.
They asked for 1.2.
So in 2017 to 2021, we received supplements every year, and we were able to spend the 1 point whatever.
Thank you. That was the point I'm making. That we have gone over the
We have
700.
gone over 17 to 21. So
No,
22 is the first year that we bought 3 plows. And that 1.2 number, I apologize, this probably doesn't include the emergency appropriation to add additional funds because of inflation. So that number is probably, the deferral amount. But so we were able to buy 3 plows that, yes, was over the 750, but we still deferred the rest of our equipment because we only ordered 3 plows. So that's why you still have the deferrals for the other equipment plus, because we only bought plows.
Yeah, so there was $226,000 that you wanted for this fiscal 22.
Right.
That's moving to next year.
Puts me up to 1.6 now.
Right.
If we get the 750, then I'm gonna defer 868 in
But-
23.
But in fairness, because you're taking this money out of the highway fund, if we were to give you 3 million this year, not that you can actually acquire the products this year still, but you could theoretically get those on order.
We could get in line with everybody else.
Yes.
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 Well, are you talking about the 3 million from the general fund?
Yes.
Well, no, I mean, that's already committed to.
The RTA.
So that's not for additional spending. If you wanted to fund this, you would have to add another 2 million to that 3 million in order to accomplish what they're,
No, I'm talking about this fiscal year, not next fiscal year.
Yeah, it's same, because the 2 million is already, that's already spent.
What 2 million are you referring to?
The three.
The 3 million.
The 3 million?
Right,
Oh, okay.
so that's already spent, this is already accounted for.
Well, the 3 million was supposed to pay back the RTA
Right.
sales tax, right?
So it can't really be
So there's-
used for additional requests that's being asked. And just to clarify also, as we're talking about these, the maintenance and the maintenance budget that we have kept and setting up the base, because there's been so much pressure on keeping that levy flat, whenever there's a supplemental, we want to show that there's going to be additional expenditures that are coming from all the different departments that at some point we're going to have to tie to that revenue stream, and that's how we document it throughout the process. I do think that the situation that we're in with county highway fund has highlighted that the maintenance budget, it doesn't, process doesn't work, but it's been very specific to county highway fund. I think as Pete was mentioning, some departments don't necessarily have to fluctuate that much, and I know we can get into that conversation in the finance committee, but I do agree that there's got to be a change on, maybe it's not a flat amount, maybe there's a percentage increase compared to the prior year that we allow, and we call that maintenance budget, and but that it cannot be like across the board, across all departments, since it's not necessarily.
We don't need to do it across the board.
No, but, and again, I don't want to get into a finance discussion in transportation, but the reality is the board is going to be asked to make decisions based on the operations of the county in all department areas. So when we're looking at the budget for this year, and if the board wants to maintain without taking CPI and without taking new growth, then they're going to be told this is the operations that are going to be changing. Transportation being one of those operations that, operationally, you're going to be asked, okay, so you're not going to have X amount of money. How is that changing your operations? Does that mean that, when it comes time to mowing in the summer, we only mow once instead of twice a year or 3 times a year? Does that mean plowing, instead of getting to the road every 20 minutes in an event, we get to it every 40 minutes in an event? That's the kind of information that the board is going to be making decisions based on. Because we're accountable to the public, you're supposed to be doing the operations. So if the board says we don't want to take CPI, we don't want to take new growth because we don't want to raise property taxes, when someone bitches about a road not being plowed, we're the ones that have to be responsible for that. I mean, and I'm just, transportation, I'm bringing it to transportation, it goes to all the departments.
It's across the board. Okay.
So, I'm sorry.
So come to our finance meeting.
I'm gonna have to do it, but I'm gonna be out of the country that day. I was just looking at that. So in the budget that's coming up, what is your request gonna be for total capital expenditures?
Or like Mike's answer of $1.6 million, but I was always under the impression that we got $750,000 out of supplement. During this today, it sounds like there's more talk. Our request today is that this committee work with us to actually put a sustainable plan together. How do we move forward doing that? $750,000 a year is less than 1% of the DOT budget, and that's our capital program. Like you said, plows are gonna break down. Technology goes outdated. These trucks are rusting through. I mean, it's not just the plow trucks, it's everything. We pushed really hard to get to 3 plow trucks, but we also can't keep deferring our other equipment. But I could easily spend 10 grand and put a new motor in a pickup versus $20,000 to fix a snowplow. So we defer the smaller stuff and keep pushing for the snowplows.
Right now, our initial conversations when we have our budget meetings between county administration and DOT leadership, which we've had 2 of them with it too, and we've had these hard conversations, that's where we're at today. So as of today, the budget that is showing to you is only showing the $750,000. That's where we are presenting you today, and as Beth alluded to, we're showing you where those needs are for us from a capital perspective.
And when we show supplementals, we would show the difference between 750 and 1.6 million as where the budget is going.
I think it would be good to add too to Joe, when the 750 first came around, we did do our homework and what we looked at for the maintenance budget would be at 1.3 back then. And then we worked with the 750 and then kept our fingers crossed with the supplements.
But keep in mind that the levy amount of $9 million is assuming 750 in capital. If you're gonna give us 1.6, we need to have a discussion, maybe that $9 million levy needs to be 10 million in order to get the highway fund back to a balance that's sustainable.
I don't mean to speak for everybody on the board. My fear is, when we use words like supplemental and stuff, is people look at that and say, well, these are things they would like to have, not things that they need to have.
Right.
Because quite frankly, until I had my conversation with Kevin Short, that's how my mind, in business, wherever I was at, when the word supplemental came, it was like, we want to try and do this beyond our budget that we presented a year ago, or 6 months ago, or 9 months ago, that got approved. And so now, I think people look at this and go, well, why wasn't that in your budget? Why are you doing this now? I know in my mind, I'd made that leap. And I think it's wrong to present it as a supplemental. It should be presented as, here's our capital budget request for the year. And then we have to look at that and say, well, we're not doing this. Or if we don't do this, what does that mean to you guys? Because otherwise, we're just kind of, I'm looking at it going, oh, so.
Well, that's why I said supplemental.
Do they really need to?
Yeah, it was supplemental with fuel. I mean,
Yeah.
I get the idea, concept, but it's not working right now.
It isn't fitting right now in this environment, but we've always, as we go into that supplemental list, we'll put asterisks by some, or we'll put in italics, like, this is on the list, but we gotta do it. And we'll do that again.
But I agree with John. I think we need to reprogram board members' thought process because it hasn't worked the last couple of years. So.
Well, that's my fear going into this one. We're going to be sitting there.
Unplug and reprogram.
18 million short.
Reboot.
So that's all I failed in my job of keeping this under an hour. I apologize, but that's all we have for the presentation. And really, we're looking for concurrence to move this budget forward through the process of finance. Thank you.
Thank
So your major discussion of the supplements of how you what you're saying.
We're going to have lots of.
Next Thursday, finance meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Never come and bring donuts.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mike.
Thank you, Chair. As I tried to listen to the conversation, and forgive me as the speakers are further away from my phone, I may be seeing there will be. Maybe at this juncture, we might want to start thinking about increasing $750,000 minimum that we have. And looking at the chart, it appears to be that we kept the $750,000 minimum policy taken for a number of years, and based on what I understand the supply chain issues as well as inflation, that may no longer be a realistic number. And I think that number may have to periodically be readjusted. It appears to be upward in that regard. So I'm wondering if, as Colin pointed out, that maybe it's time that we could discuss as a board that minimum level may be something that needs to be readjusted periodically. The second, and I agree with the two board members who have spoken, pertaining to the supplement. I too look at supplement as something over and above what would normally be part of the budget. That is just what I call an extra. And given that being the case, I don't see this as being an extra because it appears, based on my reading that and listening, is that if we don't get insurance plow for this year, policy is correct that if I'm wrong, then next year your department may come back and say we need more plows. And I just don't know if the board is ready to see a normal two purchases before. That's a 100% increase. I'm not sure if the board will be realize that, especially with potentially new board members, that shock may be a little bit too much for them to handle, although I'm making that assumption. And so the equipment part, I just don't see that as a supplement. I think that's an ongoing budgetary thing. The gasoline and diesel, while I see that inflation may cause gasoline to go up, inflation was flat last month nationwide, and your anticipation of $201,000 increase in gasoline costs, since we don't have the roads increase, that's an 84% increase in that. I just don't see that as an operational. So I think the supplement should be in your budget and I agree with Mr. Collins in their analysis. Forgive me again, Mr. Chairman, limited from the hearing of the information provided by Mr. Russo and Mr. Austin and other representatives from the Transportation Committee Department. So those are my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield there.
Thank you. Anything else further on this before we move on? Okay. Let's move on to the routine consent agenda. Are there any items anyone would like to pull off? Mr. Scala.
6.3, please.
That was coming. Anything else? Okay, then do I have a motion to approve 6.1 and 6.2? Mr. Scala moves, Mr. Collins seconds. Okay, and any other discussion? Any further discussion? We'll proceed to vote. Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Doherty?
Yes.
Ms. Gingrich?
Yes.
Mr. Nowak?
Yes.
Mr. Scala?
Yes.
Mr. Vijay?
Yeah.
And I'll vote yes, those approved. Okay, do I have a motion for item pulled off 6.3? Mr. Scala's motion, Mr. Doherty seconds. Okay, open for discussion.
Can I go? Is that okay? Can I go?
Yeah.
Okay. So I read the resolution that was written. I talked to Kevin about it. This isn't exactly what I was wanting based on the meeting that we had, so.
Does the last line bother you on that? Is that the one?
Well, there's a couple of highlighted lines that bother me.
Okay.
So I guess here's where I, without going into the actual details of what I'm changing, the issue, overall the issues that I have, I made the recommendation that we transfer the $3 million this year because of increased revenues that we weren't expecting this year and allowing us to have more money in our general fund to be able to do that for this fiscal year instead of waiting till next fiscal year.
It's for everyone, we met last week and we talked about this, and we could do that. We have this additional money we're finishing 21 with. We want to transfer it to the RTA fund, but we're recommending that. Could be done this year, could be done next year, but your recommendation, let's do it now.
Correct. We have the revenue, let's move it over. And as a side note, which Kevin didn't mention, so our auditors did ding us for the fact that we have this issue with the highway fund. So it's not that they were going to, they did.
Right.
So if you read the documents, we got dinged on it already. So I'm trying to help us in that regard. Yeah. So my issue with what I have, what's here, is it's contemplating the 9 million in the highway fund for years 24 and 25. And my problem with that is, well, twofold. One, that's locking in future boards into doing something that, it's not that I don't agree with, because I 100% agree with it, but, you know, when we're setting levies for future boards, that is kind of worrisome for me. And I personally would rather have the autonomy to try and do something with the highway fund on a year-by-year basis based on the economic situations that we find ourselves in that particular year. If we could do more than 9 million because of a particular situation, I would be in favor of that also. But I don't like the resolution as it's written with locking that in. And then down in the be it further resolved, which is really where the meat of the resolution, is, it talks about that if the levy ordinance is not approved, that this goes away, meaning this is not valid. And I don't like that statement either, because to me, this is something that needs to happen, and similar to the whole budget process that I talked about earlier, the board has to make difficult decisions, and they need to understand that this is a part of that decision-making process, and if that means we're making cuts in other areas, so be it, that it is what it is. So in essence, if you pull up the resolution in the 5th whereas, I am recommending deleting the years 24 and 25. In the first, be it further resolved, eliminating the fiscal year 2024 budget and the fiscal year 2025 budget, and the be it further resolved, next one down, the wording after the 22 levy approval has been executed, and then the third, be it further resolved, delete that one entirely.
Do I have a second to that amendment? Mr. Collins seconds that. Okay, this is money, I gotta take a roll call on this.
Yes.
You do, yeah. I mean, I'm willing to talk about my thoughts any further, but that was,
No, I agree.
Pete?
I appreciate your direction, Mike. You see in that first be it for the resolve, we use the word strive. And that was the conscious, squishy word. That we were trying to set a course. We weren't exactly saying 9 million, could be more, could be less, but that was our thought process. But, if we're gonna strike 24 and 25, then maybe we just say strive to do it in 23, period.
I'm saying that we are going to do it in 23.
Right, so I'm saying we take out the word strive.
Where is that?
The first be it further resolved.
It seems like Mike's reading off of a different.
Yeah, you're reading off an old one.
Well, this is what was.
Rich Kevin!
I noticed he just zoomed out of here. Oh, there you go.
That's like,
I got it.
Whereas, and I'm like, I'm not getting as many as he was saying.
no, be further resolved to reach 5-month reserve the county board.
Yeah, this is completely
different. Level of 9,000.
But what you want is to remove any reference to fiscal year 24 and 25.
Right, true statement.
You want it to be something that applies only to 23. If
Correct.
the committee can sort of agree to the substance of that amendment, Kevin and Peter can work on finalizing it before it goes.
What I see here, what I'm looking at, if we take out 24 and 25, and we're committing to 23, then we also take out the word strive.
I would agree.
Okay.
Well, but we also want to take out that, if it doesn't pass, that this gets voided, we want that out of there. We want
That's
this
the
to happen
third, be it further resolved, that
Yeah.
Mike recommended.
Remove that one.
Removing, yes.
So,
So bottom line is what we're saying, we want the transfer of the 3 million to happen, and we're also agreeing to set that levy at 9 million.
And work from there.
Right on
Yes.
that. Okay.
Work from there. We're gonna, if there's adjustments made, you're gonna be made, not this one.
Okay,
We
wait.
gave you the wrong resolution. I'm making amendments to a resolution that isn't correct.
Can we in this resolution state that the levy's gotta be 9 million?
That's what we're doing. So for next fiscal year budget, I'm recommending that we're making the commitment that that will be 9 million next year. But it's only for 1 year.
No, I understand that, But does that take it out of the vote we'll have when we go to approve the levy?
Well, it's prematurely setting that levy just for the highway fund, yes.
It's setting a course for your levy ordinance.
It is.
Yeah.
If,
The levy ordinance will always
Trump it.
override
Okay, that's
the
my-
existing things.
Okay,
yeah.
that's my question, okay.
Because in fact, the
Thank you for
the vote on
clarifying what I was
it will take
saying.
place after the vote on this one, so that makes,
Okay, just wanted to make sure on
but
that.
this will be setting a clear path
Okay.
for that levy ordinance.
Okay,
so what you're saying is that the levy failed all of this change.
Something's gonna be the other way.
Something would have to
The
change.
direction is that the 9 million is solid if it passes the full board. We're gonna work around
There'll be
it
gaps in the other.
Okay.
if this is what the board wants to do.
Bob?
I don't, should this be like something that's deferred to the finance committee? It seems to me like.
That's where it's going.
Well, we're voting it to take it to finance, or we're voting to take it to the board.
No, it goes to
Goes
finance.
to finance first.
Goes to finance.
Yeah, we'll have this discussion on Thursday.
And then this would be under.
just read this statement.
Your vote is just whether or not that resolution goes to the county board with the recommendation of TC.
In September.
Yeah.
Right.
You would vote on this the third Tuesday in September.
Because I think, it's part of small part of a big package. I need to make that adjustment. It's not that, that the highway department, doesn't need my 9 million, but I'm not sure where all that's coming from.
Right.
And I'm not sure, in voting yes on this is, I don't know if I'm not sure if I'd want to make a commitment on that at this point. Because, there's a lot of variables and the economy is the biggest one. And, the economy has put pressure on everybody across the country, I believe. So why isn't that affecting, that's going to affect everything that we do. The pressure of the economy is going to affect all our movements of money and how we want to borrow money or how we want to ask for more money. And I'm not sure if I'm ready to make a commitment on this at this point to say that. I mean, I can abstain, so from the vote. It's just the way I feel at this point.
No, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But first, we're still on this amendment, right? Or did you withdraw it?
No, I didn't withdraw, no.
Okay.
I had to change it because I didn't have the right resolution a little bit.
Okay. All right, so you removed the word strive also?
but- Yes, correct.
Okay.
And just to be clear, so we're going to remove all references to 2024 and 2025 and take out the third be it further resolved.
And take out after the 2023 levy approval has been executed and the second be it further resolved. Correct. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
So the three changes are all in the be it further resolved.
Okay.
Take out the word strive, take out the reference to 24 and 25 budget. The next be it further resolved, take out everything talking about after the 2023 levy approval has been executed.
Correct.
And then take out the next be it further resolved completely.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes. Yes.
Right, I know, you're going off of an older one, yes. I know where your sources are. Evidently not correct.
Okay.
Okay,
Second that motion.
we're all ready then.
So we had a motion by Mr. Scala, second by Mr. Collins to that amendment. That's what you're voting on right now.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay,
You can do it verbally, you don't have to do it, right, you can, whatever you want to do.
I'm going to call roll. Mr. Scala,
Yes.
Mr. Collins,
Yes.
Mr. Vichek,
Yes.
Mr. Doherty,
Yes.
Ms. Gingrich,
Yes.
Mr. Nowak,
And abstain.
abstain, and I will vote yes. Okay, motion carries for the amendments. Now we move forward for the, as amended. Any further comment? Okay, let's move on to the vote. Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Doherty?
Yes.
Ms. Gingrich?
Yes.
Mr. Nowak?
Abstain.
Mr. Scala?
Yes.
Mr. Doherty?
Did you read yes?
Oh, I did. Mr. Vichek, I meant.
Yes.
Okay, I'll vote yes. Motion carries. Down to old business or new business, staff recognition.
All right. Colleen will be introducing our newest staff member, or team member, and I'll just leave it at that, because if I talk further, I'm sure I'll take away all of her points that she wanted to. So,
Yes.
come on, Kevin, stand up by Colleen.
So, first of all, I would like
You
to.
made him sit through this whole damn thing?
But I know it actually, we should put it on so it can go on the work.
So it is with great pleasure that I would like to introduce, Mr. Kevin Kucharski. He recently received a promotion to the senior GIS analyst position with the departure of Mr. Shannon Bill. Kevin received his Bachelor in Science in Geography in 2013 from the Northern Illinois University. Kevin's new role will include facilitating the compilation, maintenance, and analysis and presentation of spatial and attribute data pertaining to all county-owned operated transportation infrastructure using GIS or Geographical Information Systems. Kevin's work over the last 7 years in the science shop has demonstrated a strong work ethic, professionalism, and positive attitude. Please join me in wishing Kevin the best in his new position, giving him your utmost support as he assumes his new role. We look forward to watching Kevin continue to understand his considerable skills at the DOT, and to boot, he's getting married this weekend.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you all recognizing me and look forward to my new role. I don't know if you guys have seen our new maps that we got yet. If you need any more, come find us, we'll get you more. Or they're right outside the hall. I look forward to working with you guys and very excited about the new role I got.
Congratulations again.
Thank you. And then I just have one comment to make too with it, not on you, Kevin, you can leave. This is Jana's last meeting. For those of you that don't know, Jana is leaving the county. And I just say from the DOT's perspective, it's been nothing but a pleasure to work with Jana, not only with this committee, but as the department. She has been a voice of reason on a lot of stuff. She'll put us back in the line when we need to, as the DOT team. But she's just been a great supporter of the DOT and everything we do, and she will be truly missed. So I just wanted to acknowledge that publicly and wish Jana nothing but the best in her future endeavors. And who knows, maybe she'll be back sometime in the future. So,
Thank you.
and you will be missed, Jana.
No
Okay.
speech?
That was probably too much. Jana probably didn't want me to do that, but I wanted to make committee members aware of that.
I know you all think I'm a nice queen, but I do have a lot of feelings about leaving. I feel sad to be leaving, but excited as well. So it's been a great time
Sorry to see you
here.
go. Congratulations on
Yeah.
your new and
Thank you.
Could you tell us where you're going?
I'm going to the village of Hoffman Estates.
Oh,
So I'll be doing essentially the same stuff there.
Staying in the public sector.
Yeah.
Doing the people's work.
Moving on to the top.
All right, IDOT program.
Yeah, so in your packet on page 62, Jasmine Vega prepared a memo describing IDOT's recently released MYP. I know she's prepared to do a presentation, but because budget presentation kind of went long, I won't make her do that unless there's questions and you want more explanation on stuff. But this was, I'll mention this program was delayed many months. We were supposed to get this half a year ago, and we finally got it a couple weeks ago. All the projects that are in McHenry County are included in your packet. So if you'd like to reference what the state's working on, you can go check that.
I just have a quick question. So I read through all of this. Do we offer input at all into them in regard to the projects that they're working on? Like, I sometimes try and make rhyme or reason as to what they're doing, and I don't want to say it doesn't make logical sense, but it makes little sense. How about that? So how do we?
We meet with them on a quarterly basis, and we're unique with it, and they'll run through what they're gonna be proposing. Do we have any input? Yeah, our input is kind of where your lane's like, this needs to be done sooner than later. Why are we waiting on this project? Why are we studying it for the third time? And that, a lot of it came down to funding, that hopefully now with the capital program and them getting a better feel, we'll see progress with them. But as far as other things, we don't have a lot of influence over on how they program the dollars. And that's really how I think the program is shown, is how they program the dollars.
So they don't offer, or they don't ask for our input in regard to, here's a list of 20 projects we can only fund,
No.
Okay.
They do on their website, they do have a public comment link where you can give your input to IDOT, but they don't ask us specifically as the DOT to help prioritize their projects. That's not done.
Right.
Will they receive any of the funds directly from the federal government with their new capital program?
Yes, so the federal funds from the infrastructure, the federal capital program flows through the state primarily. There are some discretionary programs where the state would have to apply for those funds, but they also increase the formula funds that they will be receiving for various federal programs. So the answer is yes, the federal resources for the state of Illinois are increasing with the recent federal capital program.
And will we see that flow through into to us?
We're hopeful that, through grants that we could apply for at the state level, we'll see some of that. We're also hopeful that potentially a program like the federal STP program that's passed through the state is going to go up, and that's directly under our control here at McHenry County through the Council of Mayors. But by and large, Mike, no. The answer is we're going to have to apply for that money. If we have a good project, we may get some additional funding for those projects, but it's not automatically given to us by the state.
And they're so efficient at the work that they do, it's mind-boggling. Okay, that was all my comments.
Anyone else? Look, it was
There you
easy
go.
for
Jasmine didn't have to worry about doing the presentation.
Well, she's next. Yeah, she's going to stay up there though. She's
Yeah.
gonna be the next one.
Okay, we'll go ahead then, PTAC update.
Yep.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So at the August 4th PTAC meeting, members were presented with discussion and key points from the June 29th Transportation Committee meeting regarding PACE's one-time allocation of $200,000. Today, staff is bringing forth the recommendation of PTAC to provide a fair holiday on MC Ride for the entire calendar year of 2023, paid for by the PACE $200,000 one-time allocation. As some background information, MC Ride is a distance-based fare structure. So in 12 months from May 2021 to May 2022, Fare revenue totaled $188,245. PTAC favored the fare holiday as it could provide financial relief to existing riders. It aims to support riders who are dependent on the service, encourages new riders, and reduces barriers to ridership. So staff has initiated conversations with PACE on how the proposal may be tracked and implemented from a service provision standpoint, and PTAC seeks TC's direction to move forward with implementing a fare holiday for riders of MC Ride during the entire 2023 calendar year. In that memo that we've included in the packet are some discussion points from that meeting, and those have been summarized, which in general just kind of identify responses to some of the comments that were made at TC's meeting in June, and why they're in favor of the fair holiday.
Page 84 in your packet if you'd like to check. So if there is concurrence from this committee to move forward with this fair holiday, how the next step would work is Jasmine, as she's negotiating with PACE on the 2023 intergovernmental agreement for service, will have a stipulation that fare throughout 2023 will be $0 for all riders throughout 2023, and that would be sort of the implementation mechanism that we would put this into effect. So that's why we're seeking direction today, because she's just kicking off those negotiations now.
Will it exceed, if riders exceed 200,000?
So we don't believe that the lost fare revenue will exceed $200,000. We think it'll be below that, and there's a couple of reasons why. Jasmine provided historical data showing what fare revenue has been over the last year. It hasn't been above $200,000. In addition, PACE is facing an extreme driver shortage, right? So they're artificially capping the level of service based on the number of drivers they have. So if PACE all of a sudden tomorrow could hire 10, 12 more drivers, maybe we'd be bumping up on that $200,000 limit. But we don't see, and in all of our discussions with PACE, they don't see this driver shortage releasing anytime soon. It's going to be with them throughout 2023, unfortunately, which will artificially cap the level of service provided. And hypothetically, Jim, if it did, if for some reason ridership just skyrocketed in 2023, let's say the lost fare revenue was $210,000, that would still be accommodated within the overall budget for the MC Ride program. It's just that $10,000 would be covered by the county in lost fare revenue, not PACE. So we're okay either way. And so, yeah, I just wanted to provide that back.
If ridership stays at the level you projected, what happens to the funds that are left over? Do they go back to PACE, or do they come here?
We don't know yet. We'll have to have discussions with them about that. Maybe we can roll it into the program at large, and it'll just help our fund balance on our RTA sales tax line.
Yeah, because that check was cut or given to the county as a whole already, so it's already
It's in our
covered out of their
Budget
budget.
check, stood there with Mike.
Right, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Tanya?
So we keep hearing, shortages, and I think we all got that email from a couple constituents saying that they're unable to even get rides. So I guess this is all great, and I think it's fantastic, but wouldn't it be moot if no one's actually getting picked up, especially like MCC, we had that agreement, and from what I'm hearing out there is that they're not able to get to school every day. They have to schedule it out 1 week in advance. Is it possible that we wouldn't hit this number, the 200, because unfortunately we're unable to give rides? It is the whole point of the program.
That's a very good question, and I know everyone did get that email about the MCC partnership. I will state one thing. We told MCC right at the front when we were negotiating this agreement that you're providing free fares for your students. That doesn't mean they're guaranteed to get rides. They have to wait in line just like everybody else does. They have to call a week ahead of time just like everybody else on our program does. And free fare is not a guarantee that they're going to get a ride. There's two different topics, two different issues altogether. And so, yeah, we will have people that are excited. They hear about this free fare pilot program, and they're like, I'm gonna try this program, I'm really excited to try it, and all of a sudden they call and they realize, can't get a ride. Now, that's out of our control, to be perfectly frank about that. The driver shortage is not within the county's control. Pace is in the driver's seat, and there's nothing we can do as a county to improve that situation. What is under our control is the fare structure. And so we are going to, through staff, we're going to push as hard as we can to help Pace through this driver shortage problem, but ultimately they're the ones that have to fix it, not us.
Well, maybe, like, would it make sense, like a recommendation, that we put out some type of communication that says that this is, we're doing our best here on our end, because I think we're getting a lot of feedback from, our community saying that you're offering something that you're not able to fulfill. But if we can say we're still working with that partnership, but it's unfortunately out of the county's control, it might ease,
I think that's a great idea.
the push on the county, and maybe they'll contact Pace.
Yeah, setting expectations.
Or maybe there'll
appropriately.
be a driver.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. I agree. I think maybe we should have done a better job with that with MCC, setting the expectations so that they understand the reality of the situation. If we do roll this out, we will do a much better job communicating the issue of the driver shortage to drivers.
Thank you.
Mr. Scala.
We didn't have limitations on what we could use the 200,000 for, correct?
We did, and Jasmine, could you maybe explain what Pace, do you remember what Pace had told us with that?
So there's limitations on operational expenses. Like we can't buy a new bus, for instance.
Capital is not eligible. It needs to be public transit related. It can't be for a road, a bridge we want to
Well, no,
replace.
so I guess here's my thought. Obviously, Pace has the buses. They don't have people to drive the buses. So is it possible for us to use the 200,000 to hire for a year drivers for the buses that will service our needs?
I think the issue is that what they're paying the drivers is not sufficient to attract people to want to do it.
Yeah, so I'm saying we are the driver mechanism of that.
We could supplement the
Wage for 1 year,
the
but
wage for a year.
then Pace would have to either absorb that afterwards or go back down.
And part of the problem is they've got contracts. So again, Pace uses a contractor for this, so they're not Pace drivers. They're a union contract, and so there's already a contract in place setting the wage schedule for 2023.
No, what I'm saying, okay, so here's what I'm saying. Pace gives us the equipment. Pace gives us the bus. We hire the employee for a year to drive their equipment to run our routes.
Is it feasible? Yes. It would turn our entire structure on its head. And could we do it? Yeah, we probably could, but it would be totally changing the structure of this program that's been operational for 10 years now, under a certain way of doing business. And it would involve a lot more DOT staff involved. I mean, that's just the reality.
And then you convert it into like a township busing program if you start hiring the drivers and dictating what they do. We don't want to do that.
I mean, we love the fact that we cut Pace a check every month. They handle all of the drivers, the call center, the buses, the training of the drivers, the certifications, the sensitivity trainings. Like, we don't do any of that. We just cut them a check. We say, you provide this much service, here's the dollars from the county. Thank you. And what you're asking is for us to take more active involvement in the operational stuff. And
well, I don't know what I'm asking.
Yeah.
The box is here and I'm, out in right field somewhere, so.
And I appreciate that.
I'm just, all I'm saying is if we have 200,000 and we can somehow get drivers here, because they have the equipment, we already know that, it's just they don't have people to drive their equipment. Is there some, even just having the discussion with them and saying, hey, we're willing to use our 200,000 to somehow get drivers for our McHenry County needs. I don't know what that looks like, but I'd rather use the 200,000 for that than discounting a fare or making it zero. I mean, I don't, to me, that sets a bad precedent in and of itself, so I'm not really in favor of that to begin with. I'm more in favor of trying to actually get the service to the people that really need the service.
Go ahead, John.
at 100,000 foot level, does that even seem like a legal realm of what we could do?
I don't know what their contract is with their drivers.
What about for the Uber Lyft?
So we have been asking Pace to, and actually Pace has made strides with this, with using a TNC, transportation network company like Uber and Lyft, for their ADA paratransit services. So they just rolled out a new program where instead of sending a minibus or a taxi to pick up an ADA paratransit rider, they'll dispatch an Uber. If the rider wants to get an Uber, they can go on their app, get an Uber, and it's subsidized just like the bus and the taxis are. But the problem is those are just for ADA trips, ADA paratransit. We don't have ADA in McHenry County because we don't have any fixed routes in McHenry County. And so while this helps the rest of the region very much, because now they have 3 options for service provision, not just 2, for McHenry, we're still stuck in the Stone Age. We just have buses or taxis. And so we're trying to push Pace to use TNCs for programs like ours, like MC Ride, where a rider can either call that call center a week ahead of time at 5 in the morning, and maybe they'll get a ride on a bus. Or they could get up one morning and say, I need to go to the grocery store on my Uber, I need to get an Uber. They can theoretically get an Uber that's dispatched from Pace, subsidized by the county and Pace, just like the bus would be. But Pace has been reluctant to do that for a variety of reasons. They don't seem to make it a priority for us. So we can lobby them, maybe above staff level, maybe the county board wants to take a more active role in pushing Pace to get more service via Uber and Lyft on the road next year even. They could do that. And theoretically, if Uber and Lyft is more efficient than a bus and a taxi, it could be cost neutral, or actually could be a cost savings. Maybe none of this money would even have to go to something like that. Because again, we're paying $30 per trip on buses and taxis. If Uber can do it for $28, it's cost neutral. So those are things we're thinking about. It's just, again, we're not in the driver's seat of any of this. We're in the passenger seat. And we can tell the driver, you should go this way, but if they're not listening, we're kind of stuck.
But we can't use the 200,000 for Uber because of that reason.
If we want to use Uber and Lyft as part of the MC Ride program, where Pace is the one managing it, they're the ones coordinating with the call center so that, it's all one program, then no, we can't use this money for that. If we, the county, wanted to create a whole new program, just an Uber program that's managed and operated by county staff, we could do that just with this $200,000. I'm pretty sure that would be an eligible expense. But again, we've never done that here. And I don't know if there's a willingness by the board to create this separate program in MC Ride.
I don't want to create a separate program, I just want people that are here to get the services that
Of course, you could handle the problem Tanya brought up with MCC and let MCC hire the people to run it. And subsidize MCC to do it.
Do we have a breakdown of, I don't know if Pace gives us any data to, what riders are denied or given different times or just, or a successful ride?
We get all that data. We get more data than you'll ever need.
Do we have like a roundabout number? And
I haven't looked at it lately, our denial reports, but we can pull that and send that information out after this meeting, just to give everybody an understanding.
And that's been nothing new. That's ever since we've had this program. There are rides that are going to be denied.
And keep in mind, this is too in the weeds, but there's 2 types of denials. There's capacity denial and there's adversarial denial. Capacity denial is somebody calls up and Pace says, I literally cannot get you to where you need to go today, on the day you request. And that's a capacity usually due to drivers or vehicles. They don't have the drivers, they don't own the vehicles. Adversarial is somebody calls up and says, I need to get to MCC at 7 a.m. And Pace says, I could get you there at 6 or 9. And the rider's like, well, those times don't work for me, sorry, hang on. That's an adversarial denial. Pace offered them an option, they didn't take the option, and most of our denials are adversarial, meaning they're given an option, it just may not be the exact right time that they need to get picked up.
And the data has that too?
The data has all that kind of
I think that would be important.
Mr.
Thank you.
Doherty?
Yeah, I guess I'm not in favor of just giving flat out everybody. I don't like the option of that. I mean, I like the option, Mike, or you were talking a little bit about if we could somehow get Pace to do the, enhance what they're offering. And again, I don't want it to come back to, the department here that you have to be providing the services. You need to be the call center. I mean, the structure's in place. I think that's the best structure to use. So, I guess I would like to see if we can investigate other uses of the 200 other than, I just don't like the free option. I think it's such a, so then next year they'll complain because we raised the fare. Well, we didn't raise it, we put the fare back. I mean, I don't like the fact that it's just free. I like the incentive, but you have to pay something.
And that's why we strategically called it a holiday.
Right.
It's a temporary holiday, it's not permanent. But I understand what you're saying. We can go back to the drawing board.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have to make this decision this month, do we? I mean, you would like it.
We
but-
would like direction, if not this month, definitely by next month. we
Yeah,
need some
I mean,
direction.
I guess then, Mike, when I'd like the direction to go, try to see if you can get them to enhance what they're offering. That would be my vote.
When's the next PTAC meeting?
Yeah, it's too late. We'd have to either hold a special PTAC meeting this month or next, or we would have to bypass the Public Transportation Advisory Committee altogether and just work through this committee to figure out something. I think the next meeting is not till October, November.
John?
I agree. I think we talked about this when this first came up, about giving a holiday was probably not a good idea because it sets an expectation that I don't think we want to set. Regardless of what you call it, people are just going to know I got a free ride. And I think that's going to create a problem in 2024. So I think that, and I think looking for them to offer, do something. What percentage of the rides do we know, just off the top of your head, are MCC students? They make up 25%? I'm not going to hold you to the number. If you just think it's probably 20%.
It's a very small percentage.
It's a very small percentage. Okay.
They're RTC students.
It is, and it's also seasonal, so.
Well, sure,
We
yeah.
saw 30 rides in June and July. It just depends on the time of the
Okay.
year.
Okay.
I'm sorry, just one more question. Jasmine gave us different options last time. It was 24 hours, free for the year, and there was one more that you had mentioned when we talked about it.
It could have been the e-bikes. We initially
Oh, that's
started
right.
with about 6 recommendations and.
Okay, and the e-bikes,
Yeah,
okay.
the e-bike subsidy was sort of an outside the box idea
Yeah.
that we think would still be eligible for using this funding, but it's not PACE related, right? So, but again, PTAC, of those three, that was narrowed down by this committee, PTAC said this was going to be their preference, not the other two.
Holiday.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I apologize, I'm sorry. You said that Lyft and Uber are available for ADA?
Yes, so, they're contracted through PACE. So if somebody wants an ADA ride, they're given a special code, and they're ADA eligible, certified. They're given a special code by PACE that says, type this into your Uber app, you'll get instead of a $25 Uber ride, it's gonna cost you the ADA fare, which is $3.
Got it, okay.
And it's just for 3/4 of a mile within a fixed route. So again, theoretically, if somebody's ADA certified along Randall Road, they could get this Uber ride via ADA paratransit along the Randall Road corridor, because that's where we have a fixed bus network. But really nowhere else in the county has this option.
You should get Pace to agree to do that on denials, and then tell Pace that you'll reimburse so they call Pace first, they get denied, Pace says, but you have the option of using Uber, here's a code for it. Use that.
Paid for by.
The 200.
By the 200.
Well, I was just gonna, my question was, can we give them some type of certificate they could hand to the Uber driver? But, yeah, the code thing, we pay out the 200,000, that would make sense.
That shouldn't be too
You wouldn't think so.
Okay. All right, so we didn't get anywhere in this.
I think we don't like the idea of free rides.
So, yeah, I guess that's where, because we're looking for direction. We know we have to negotiate with staff and bring the contract forward before the end of the year and that stuff. So I'm reading too that it doesn't seem like the committee is interested in the holiday, as it's saying, and we necessarily don't have the time to go back to PTAC unless we call a special meeting with that. So maybe we need to have, based on today's conversations here, have additional conversations with PACE to see if any of those other options are even realistic, because they may not be. And then come back to this committee next month, hopefully if we've got answers to say, here's what PACE told us one way or another, and then move from there.
Maybe we'll even see if PACE can come to next month's meeting so that they can start addressing some of these questions. Because honestly, I hate being the messenger. Yeah, that's.
You okay with that? I like that.
Yeah, I'll see what I can do to.
Okay. Let's figure out where it was at.
8.2.
8.2. Yep.
2050 plan.
2050.
Yeah, John Paul is going to be giving an update on the 2050 plan, where we're at right now.
Floor is yours, JP.
We do have a PowerPoint as well to go along with this.
Well, good morning, everyone. This presentation is an overview of the second phase of public engagement for the McHenry County Moves 2050 Long Range Transportation Plan. The focus on this second round of public engagement was really looking at the public's opinion for transportation improvement types within the county. This phase began in the spring and ended in midsummer 2022. And there were a number of topic areas for feedback requested. Those included roadway, rural safety, pedestrian bicycle, public transit, and environmental and sustainability elements. We also asked for inputs regarding the goals and vision of the plan. In total, we received 397 completed surveys and had 2,078 interactions or data points to then provide analysis for the second phase report. So through the engagement efforts of this phase, there were over 101,000 community touch points to raise awareness of the plan and encourage feedback from the public regarding the transportation system. Through social media, there was a robust campaign for this second round. We also were able to reach over 141,000 individuals. And some outreach methods that we used in this phase were attendance at community events, or pop-ups as they're commonly known as. We also sent a number of emails out through a distribution list of over 600 individuals and organizations, but our information was published through a number of county newsletters as well. We reached out to partner municipal organizations who also share that information on social media and their communications. And lastly, we had a self-paced virtual engagement, which provided an overview of the information provided at the pop-up meetings, but then also the same information as provided during the stakeholder workshops linked to the survey, and an open house before the June 2022 county board meeting. So who did we hear from? County residents were the top participants in this engagement effort. Approximately 65% of those individuals who replied to the survey identified themselves as a resident of the county. Representation in gender was split almost equally between males and females, with favoring more participation from females with this particular phase of engagement. 68% of all respondents fell between the ages of 45 to 74, and 23% of all respondents fell between the ages of 25 to 44. In general, survey respondents were representative of the county population. And this particular slide shows some of the geographic-based comments that we received. This particular map is also included in the full report, and I'll provide details towards the end of the presentation here. But I would like to note that we received approximately 160 location-based comments, which covered a variety of modes of transportation, which a long-range plan will address. So similar to phase one, phase two also included stakeholder workshops, and those were held towards the end of May.
Stakeholders provided feedback on the topic areas that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. I'm just going to go briefly through some slides, and again, all this information is in the full report. So when provided options of roadway types of improvements, being traffic signals, roundabouts, bypass routes, stakeholders ranked all the ideas on roadway at least good or very good. Regarding rural safety, stakeholders felt that all ideas presented for rural safety were at least good, but rumble strips, active flashing advanced warning signs, and pavement markings ranked at the top. Related to pedestrian and bicycle facilities, enhanced safety for crossing streets and separated paths along the road remain some of the top priorities for that feedback. And then with public transportation, most participating stakeholders were uncertain or they did not believe that community members were aware of the MC Merit service. So again, there's opportunities there to further promote education of available transportation services and infrastructures through this long-range transportation planning process. Generally, stakeholders were positive, or I should say positively received the draft goals and objectives for the long-range plan. And I would like to note that the goals and visions and objectives that were developed for feedback were derived from that Phase 1 engagement report. So we received a number of feedback from the public and stakeholders to develop those goals and objectives. So those were positively received in this one. So moving forward with the survey results from the Transportation Improvement Survey and self-paced virtual engagement. For roadway improvements, roundabouts had the most very good idea selected from those respondents compared to traffic signals and bypass routes. However, I will say that bypass routes were second and traffic signals ranked as third, and that is just for the very good idea category. For rural road safety, turn lanes at intersections were ranked first in terms of very good as an idea. Second was more active advanced warning signs and pavement markings, and then wider shoulders came in as third. So again, very similar to some of the feedback we received from the stakeholders. We also heard from the public. For pedestrian and bicycle elements, individuals were asked to provide feedback on improvement type within cities or village centers, so municipalities, within the neighborhoods they reside, but then also for rural or non-urban areas. And I can say that from the results, paved shoulders and on-street bike lanes was selected as a top choice in all three areas. Year-round maintenance was desired in neighborhoods the most, compared to city and village centers and rural areas. And then generally, respondents felt that recreational trails are more important in rural areas versus neighborhoods or city and village centers. So some of the feedback that we received for public transit, I'll just kind of highlight here various services and feedback. So for Metro, most respondents stated that they would use that service to get to work, with PACE service as a second. For PACE, most respondents stated that they would use PACE bus routes for shopping, recreational, social purposes, and to get to school. And then for the MC Ride program, most respondents stated that they would use that service to get to medical appointments, with MC Ride also being the second choice for accessing shopping and going to school. Some environmental and sustainability elements that were asked. In general, respondents felt that support for transportation enhancements that would lessen environmental impacts was important, and we should continue pursuing those within the long-range planning process. And then also respondents were favorable of McHenry County moving toward a direction where it has a reputation as the greenest county in the state to live, work, and play. General public feedback on the goals and objectives was similar to those of the stakeholders, and that these were positively received. So again, that is some good feedback that we received in terms of the goals and objectives that were drafted. So in terms of next steps, one is to publish the Phase 2 engagement report on the project website. And I'm happy to say that as of 8 a.m. this morning, that is available. Mr. Jeff Young is here from HDR, our consultant team, project manager. I have to thank him and his team for getting that up prior to the Transportation Committee meeting. We'll also then begin to utilize public feedback and technical analysis to develop the draft plan components. And some of that will include multimodal accessibility, transit system performance, safety assessments, bicycle and pedestrian assessments, future baseline conditions, and then impactful transit technologies. That's not an exhaustive list of everything that will be developed within the long-range plan, but just shows an example of what we'll be doing moving forward. The goal is to then release the draft McHenry County Moves 2050 Long-Range Transportation Plan in spring of 2023, and that will go out for another public review and comment period with the intent of bringing the plan to the Transportation Committee and the County Board in summer for approval. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Okay, anyone have any questions?
Could we get a copy of the slide, the deck?
Absolutely.
Awesome, thanks.
And I will say too that with the slides, those were derived from the report itself, so the report in its entirety is on the website, but we'll get the slides here as well.
Thank you. Good info.
Anything else? All right.
Well done, JP.
Thank you.
He's like so relaxed.
Staff report, anything?
Just Johnsburg.
Okay.
So the one project we want to touch on is Johnsburg Road Bridge. We're looking to do a superstructure replacement instead of a complete bridge replacement. We talked last month that it'll be a much better cost option for us and much faster. So what we're looking to do to try to expedite that even further is end of September, going to what we'll call a materials letting, where we'll kind of pre-order the box beams that we'll use to replace the superstructure on that bridge. It takes 3 to 4 months to procure, build, and inspect those beams, while we're finishing up the plans and approvals with IDOT and IDNR to do a project letting maybe March, early next year, to have the contractor place them and do road work. So what we'll be able to do is overlap these, building the beams so that we can start setting them earlier next year. So look for that coming through October TC, November board approval for a contract award to procure box beams for the new superstructure on Johnsburg Road.
So why do you need to do an environmental if you're just doing the deck?
Because it's IDOT. So because of the waterway that we're on, IDOT wants to ensure that the hydraulics are appropriate for just replacing the top and putting it back on. We're working through that, and the IDNR also regulates this waterway because it ties into the Fox River. We have to get their okay, that just taking off the deck and putting on a new one doesn't create any flooding issues, because it won't, because we don't have them today. We just have to show them, and then it takes time for these approvals. So while we wait for that, we want to get the beams ordered so that we can move everything forward. Unbelievable. But the world we have to live in.
Okay.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that's it for staff report. Right, yep.
Discussion of program evaluations.
Just super quick, I won't take your time. You know, we've talked about this with other committees. Your county board strategic plan calls for some program evaluations across the board. We're defining program evaluations as programs are things that we're doing that we don't have to be doing. We kind of look for each committee in some of your areas of responsibilities to find some of those those programs that fit that mold of things we're doing that we don't have to be doing. Then working with the subject matter experts in each area to kind of do some analysis. Myself, Alicia Schuler, Scott Hartman, Shaylin Daigle, we're all kind of running point on this and touching into the areas. We've identified Mr. Hennings and Mr. Markinson as our subject matter experts to look at a couple programs that we're doing. Yeah, you don't know this yet.
Congratulations.
The no salt, but in your instance, we're looking at your no salt applications, your vegetation applications, and you know, what does that mean in terms of cost, what's it mean in terms of savings, what's it mean in terms of environment, just doing some analysis so you all can feel comfortable making the kind of financial commitments that you make into these programs. Similarly and timely, our MC Ride program, that is a big lift. We're getting a lot of help for doing that. We're touching a lot of lives dramatically, but it comes at a pretty significant expense. So we just want to try, wrap our arms around that, create some kind of a report that we can get you can react to it, give us some direction on some additional analysis, but that's our objective over the next couple of months, is to start to do some of these program evaluations for transportation. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Had a need for executive session?
Yes. Land acquisition and pending litigation.
All right. Go ahead, Mike. Move to go into. Executive session back into normal session.
Make a motion to go back in the normal session?
Mr. Collins, second. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Motion adjourned.
Mr. Collins, motion to adjourn.
So just before we do, just so you know, next meeting date will be, we will be meeting at the administration building, and there also will be a public hearing for the Randall Road Quick Take prior to that, correct?
I think we're gonna try to do it prior.
We're gonna try doing it beforehand?
It's neater that way, yeah.
Okay.
So, you say prior, like meaning like
It might be at,
We'll start that at like 8 o'clock and maybe bump the transportation committee to like
8:30.
9, 8:30 or 9.
Okay.
I will not be here next week.
Okay.
You won't be.
Can I ask a quick question? What are we doing as far as, Wednesday before Thanksgiving? Are you gonna try and have I'm not around, so that's why I'm asking.
I mean, this far in advance, I would say no, and that it's a week before the new board is seated. And that everything is typically, historically, we've canceled that meeting anyways. So I'm assuming it would be canceled, but I don't know if there was something that came up that was of that urgency. But I would assume it's gonna be canceled, Mike.
Okay. I won't be here if you don't cancel, so.
You and a lot of people, probably, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I second John's motion to adjourn.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I know it was a longer meeting.
We just keep getting going, I'm fine.
Let's get warmed up.
So what is all this?
That's Jim's opinion on the work.
That's the Warren Drive.
Oh.
That's history right there.
Holy.
She wanted to get something out before.
Cleaned out her file cabinet.
I didn't write it all, it's just.
So that's what.
I just said.
That's actually very
I was gonna send it to her here.
Oh, you've seen it?
No, I read what that was. She handed it out. That's what I saw.
that's already there.
Oh, it is there.
It's been there for a couple months.
Oh, a couple months. I was noting how the quick take thing always is great. It's a quick crosswalk.
This is gonna be good.
We were gonna have it in regardless of what happened with the signal.